Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you?
I'm wearing half a black armband, Kevin, having lost Moises Caicedo, and I'm also have half of a shit grin because of the sale of Moises Caicedo for a British record fee. I never thought in all of my days that Brighton would be anywhere connected with such a sentence.
Yeah, it's a lot of money for a defensive midfield player, isn't it, Kieran? I'm still trying to work out how you wear half an armband. It's quite a good trick if you can pull that one off. We are recording this, Kieran. I think we should say full disclosure just before the Australia-England game in the semi-finals of the Women's World Cup, which is why we're not mentioning the outcome. But just to deal with that, our listeners can delete as appropriate. Well done, England. Well done, Australia. A 7-7 draw and a dog on the pitch. Who would have thought that would happen? It's Newsday, Kieran. We're back. We're back in our full routine, hopefully. They're not many news stories, Kieran, but they are biggies. They're big news stories.
Yes.
The first one, Kieran, and I suspect we're going to be talking about this for the next 2 years. Neymar is the latest big name to go to Saudi Arabia. A lot of people, Kieran, have asked us to explain exactly what's going on with the Saudi Pro League. So can I ask you a couple of questions about what... first of all, where's the money coming from? People are asking. I think it's fairly obvious where the money's coming from, Kieran, but I'd like your take on it.
Yes, as far as the Saudi Pro League is concerned, 4 of the clubs there are now have effectively been nationalised and are controlled by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which I think people are more familiar with as being the new owners of Newcastle United, and they've been there now for coming on for 2 years. The other clubs in the Saudi Pro League have effectively been given grants stroke subsidies in order to be competitive in the transfer market and to prevent the Saudi Pro League being dominated by just 1 or 2 clubs, because one of the things we like about football is the concept of jeopardy and uncertainty, and one of the things which is good about the Premier League is that you go into a set of weekend fixtures. Yes, you know that some clubs are more likely to win fixtures than others, but Palace have got some fantastic results in recent years. Brighton have turned over some of the bigger teams as well. The fact on the opening day of the season a couple of years ago, Brentford turned over Arsenal and so on. So I think what we will have seen is an unlimited amount of money is available to the clubs in the Saudi Pro League. And there is no equivalent of financial fair play. So we are in an equivalent position to where we were in the Premier League in 2003, where Abramovich came in and just blew the transfer market and blew the wage market, which allowed Chelsea to go from being a club which hadn't won the title for a period of 50 years into one which was instantly competitive. And the same happened with regards to Manchester City when they were acquired by UAE in 2008, 2009, whenever it was. They could spend unlimited amounts, and that's why they lost. But they lost £200 million in a single season. And pre-financial fair play, that's what you were allowed to do. So that's where we are as far as the market and the funding is concerned. And from the Saudi perspective, they've looked at the interest in the Qatar World Cup. And how many people talk about Qatari football today? Approximately nobody.
Gianni Infantino, because he lives there.
Well, he does. That's right. Yes. And people complain about his £3 million a year salary, but I think it's very harsh because that's the pre-tax figure, and the post-tax figure of £3 million a year isn't discussed. But they are in a position to be very competitive in the market because the costs of hosting the World Cup was somewhere in the region of $200 billion for Qatar. And it looks as if the Saudi League is probably going to cost around about $5 billion a year in terms of transfer fees and wages. So it's a fraction of the cost of hosting the World Cup. And you've got, looks like Neymar, we've seen Mahrez go, Cristiano Ronaldo, Benzema. They've got some very high-profile players. They've taken Jordan Henderson, although I got a call from somebody from Pickford's who were doing his move. They said, "You work in football." And I said, yeah, I do. And they go, well, we're responsible for moving Jordan Pickford's possessions to Saudi, and he appears to have left behind a set of rainbow laces. Have you got a forwarding address? I go, I don't know what to do about that. So they've got unlimited money. And this allows them to be competitive in the market, and that means that there is a decision to be made for footballers. And I'm not going to slag off footballers because, as we said, if we were offered £1 million an episode to host the price of football from Riyadh, we'd be there.
Yeah, I would have pressed pause right now. And booked a ticket. Yes, slight Jordan Henderson, Jordan Pickford confusion in that story.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes, the Jordan Henderson rainbow laces is a story for another pod, isn't it? I mean, Kieran, the Saudi money isn't going to run out anytime soon. But do you think this is a one-off spending spree as part of sport washing or whatever you think it is, or is this going to be a consistent theme over the next couple of years as the Saudi authorities try and genuinely improve the level of football in that league?
I think it's part of a long-term strategy. Mohammed bin Salman has a 2030 vision which he wants to implement. So we're looking at it from a geopolitical point of view. Saudi Arabia has a very young population. It's got a rapidly growing population, and this is a football finance show. This isn't a politics show, and I'm not interested in politics, as I think people are fairly aware. But Mohammed bin Salman is also aware of what happened in the Arab Spring. When Libya, Egypt, there was dissent often from young people. So part of the unwritten contract is I'll deliver you high class entertainment in the sporting and other world, and I'll keep you happy. And if you're happy, you're not going to dissent. So I think there are broader issues. Saudi Arabia is also very, very keen to host either the 2030 or more probably the 2034 World Cup. And having a more competitive domestic competition is one way of persuading the decision makers at FIFA. And the way that the World Cup is allocated these days is different to where we were when Qatar was awarded it. That was done by a fairly small committee, of whom very few of them still seem to be working within FIFA. Now it's one country, one vote. So if you can say, well, look, come to Saudi Arabia, we've already got Ronaldo, we've already got Benzema, we've already got Neymar, then that helps. And you also have to give acknowledgement that Saudi Arabia has qualified for 5 out of the last 7 World Cups.
Yeah, they beat Argentina in the last tournament.
Yeah. So it's not a footballing wilderness. It does have a reasonably strong competition there. So that's where we are as far as the funding is concerned. It's a long-term commitment. I'm not expecting a U-turn as we saw in relation to China. And I think sort of the next issue is, where do they go next? We've sort of seen mutterings from UEFA. That's just there's no reason why the Champions League final should take place in Europe. Could we see the Community Shield take place there? Is there an opportunity? Because ultimately money talks for the resurrection of the 39th game. Remember that somewhat lunatic scheme that was suggested a few years ago to take the Premier League overseas, and certainly we've seen that in terms of the NFL and other US franchise sports. So Saudi Arabia is fully aware of the success that it has had in terms of golf, with the creation of the LIV scheme and the fact that effectively the opposition conceded that. Watch this space is my view.
Yeah, boxing as well, a lot of big fights taking part. I do like the idea of somebody with 20/30 vision. That's a proper that's a proper low rent superhero, that, isn't it? He can see really well out of one eye. Two more questions for you, Kieran, because this is a subject that we probably will be exploring again. It looks, I mean, with the ridiculous money paid for Caicedo, is it affecting the English transfer market or the European transfer market? Because there is a theory. I've heard several people mention the fact that it may affect clubs like Bournemouth, Palace, Fulham more, because the big clubs, the top six clubs, know that if they need to offload players, they can do so to Saudi Arabia for maybe twice as much as they would have been able to do before. And then they've got a lot of extra money to snaffle players from clubs like Palace and Bournemouth.
Yes, I think to date there have been a lot of winners as a result of the increased budget of Saudi Arabia. And the winners, first of all, from a financial point of view, the players, because you're effectively, you can add a zero to your pay packet, or certainly increase it by a factor of 4 or 5. That's good news for the agents and the people doing the introductions. The selling clubs don't have to worry too much about a pushback in terms of the asking prices. So we saw that with St Maxim at Newcastle. Chelsea have shifted a couple of players. I think we might be seeing Laporte go from Manchester City, and they've already sold Mahrez to Saudi. So the players and the selling clubs, and they tend to be the biggest clubs. Yeah, in fact, we've already named Chelsea, Manchester City, Liverpool with Henderson and Fabinho, Newcastle, who I think have to be thrown into the mix because I think they've got some sort of connection with Saudi Arabia themselves.
I believe so. I believe their away kit is similar.
Yeah. So you throw all of that into the mix, and those clubs. Now, could a Saudi Arabia club get in contact with Palace and say, we want to buy one of your players? Yes, it could. It's a case of setting up those connections. And I think the bigger clubs have already established those lines of communication. And I think there's also a sort of, I wouldn't say it's chaos, but I think there doesn't appear to be a structure in terms of player recruitment. Is that we want high profile players, and the high profile players tend to play for the clubs with the biggest names, hence Neymar, Ronaldo, Benzema and so on.
And finally, Kieran, there are people who would say around the world, excuse me, that global football is kind of very Eurocentric. It tends to be European leagues that get the biggest broadcasting figures around the world and so on. And there are people who are saying, well, European clubs are now getting a taste of what they've been doing to the rest of the world for the last 20 years. In other words, buying the best players from all over the rest of the world and taking them to Europe. And now it's happening to them and they're very unhappy about it. Is there an element of truth in that?
There is an element of truth. And you and I, a gentleman of a certain age, we can remember when it was initially Italian clubs that were taking Ray Wilkins, Graham Souness, Trevor Francis. Yeah. So Italy used to be the sexy place in Europe, and we all remember Paul Gascoigne going there and James Richardson with Football Italia, and that was great. And then it became Spain with the dominance, I think, for a period of Real Madrid and the Galacticos scheme, and the Premier League has replaced those two countries due to its success. And you've got to give the Premier League credit. Its success at going to all of those international markets and saying, look, we've got a product, and it's saying to broadcasters, we've got a product is, A, it will bring in subscribers, and B, it will keep those subscribers because it's new content every week. And that's why the Premier League's broadcast to 190 different countries. And that's why the Premier League is the dominant institution, because it's And the analogy I would use would be a bit like the UK motorcycle manufacturing market post-war. Everybody thought, we've got UK companies. I'm not big on motorbikes, but was it like likes of Norton and so on, who were British motorbike manufacturing companies, and they were successful. They had a dominance of the market, and then Honda and Kawasaki came along, and they offered something which was better and cheaper. And the UK guys said, they're foreigners, we don't need to worry about them. Well, that's what Spain and Italy did. They were completely blindsided by the Premier League. And they rested on their laurels, and now they're having to pay catch up, and very difficult as well.
Do you know what, Kieran? If somebody was to ask me the most unexpected sentence of the pod so far in the last 2 years, I think the analogy I would use would be the post-war motorcycle business in Britain would be very high up the list. If anyone's doing spread betting on price of football bingo today, they've just lost a lot of money. I mean, you'd expect. Well, there's a Brighton quinoa analogy coming up, Kieran. That's what you expect. Because Brighton they've made enough money in the past couple of days, Kieran, to cover the entire beach with quinoa. To get rid of the gravel on that terrible pebbly Brighton beach, put quinoa down. That'll please the seagulls as well. 115 million quid for Caicedo, Kieran. Has the world gone mad?
Well, the world hasn't gone mad, because remember we had the Trevor Francis nostalgia pod, and I'm not putting Moises Caicedo in the same bracket as Trevor Francis. Well, certainly not yet. And we said if you adjusted for inflation in terms of what we regard as football inflation in terms of the revenues, Trevor Francis would have cost somewhere in the region of 250 million. Based on the price rises. So 115 million for Caicedo is, certainly it's probably more than people expected, but it does show that those Arsenal fans who were throwing tantrums in January when Brighton said 60 million's not enough have been proved to eat some quinoa pie. So. A lot the reaction that we've had over the course of the last 2 days since the deal has gone through, and that's on top of and I know you're going to talk about Elise, and they're signing the kid from Southampton. They've been very, very busy in the market, and this is where we do enter price of football bingo. It's amortization time, and for those people unfamiliar with the term, I think we sort of need to take a step back and say, well, the question that is being asked, and there's lots of people having lots of arguments on social media, is how can Chelsea afford to do this?
Well, it's not so much how can they afford to do it, Kieran, it's how can they afford to do it and stay within FFP regulations is what everyone's...
Yeah, right. So let's take a look at as the Caicedo deal, and we'll also take a look at the Mason Mount deal as two opposite sides of the relationship here. Caicedo has signed for £100 million guaranteed plus 15 million of add-ons. So what Chelsea will do is to say, well, we don't know whether the add-ons are going to take place. And they are, I think they're, from my understanding, they're quite easy to achieve, but Chelsea have not yet qualified for Europe. And I think it will be an extra 5 million on so many appearances and another 5 million on so many appearances and so on. So they say, right, it's £100 million. He signed an 8-year contract. And traditionally, we are used to footballers signing a 4 or a 5-year deal when he joins. And what you do with amortization is you say, well, let's take the price, the guaranteed price, and then divide that by the number of years in the contract. 100 divided by 8 gives you a £12.5 million cost a year for 8 years. So that's what Chelsea now have as going into their FFP calculations. Against that, we've got the sale of Mason Mount. If you sell a player who comes from your academy, the profit for FFP purposes is the sales price less the book value of the player. Well, a player from the academy, it costs you nothing. So Mount went for 55 million, I think it was 55 million guaranteed. So they've got 55 million pounds in the plus column, and they've got 12.5 in the minus column. And that's why Chelsea have gone through this particular strategy. So they can actually also afford potentially to bid for players X, Y, and Z. And you might be saying, well, what about the wages issues? Well, what Chelsea have been quite successful at is Kante has gone. Now, Kante was one of the highest paid players at Chelsea. So let's say that he was on 300 grand a week. That's gone. The players that they're bringing in, we don't know what they're being paid, and there's a lot of there's a lot of speculation. But certainly the narrative which is coming out of Chelsea, and that's sort of filters through to me because I talk to journalists, is that the players are not on the same level of wages. They're still, it will still be 100 grand plus a week. So if Kante goes, you've saved yourself 300 grand a week. If you can now buy two players who are costing you 300 grand a week between you, you see effectively you're getting 2 for 1. So you put all of that through, and then you throw into the mix is that all of the focus is on the player purchases, but Chelsea have made more money over the course of the last 5-10 years than any other club in the Premier League by a huge amount. You think about Hazard leaving, and then when we did have, we've just been talking about Saudi Arabia, we did have that huge level of interest in English football as a recruitment arm for the Chinese Super League. Well, who went there? Oscar went there, and Ramirez went there, and both of those went for high fees. Chelsea have shifted an awful lot of players out of the club on a regular basis. Chelsea have made twice as much money in the last decade from player sales as they have from ticket sales, which is ludicrous.
Wow. Kieran, before I talk about Elise, I want to ask you a little bit more about the Caicedo transfer. In particular, this midnight bid sealed envelope process, is that common? And have a lot of people saying, well, Brighton or Caicedo have been very clever in playing Liverpool and Chelsea off against each other when it seemed like he was always only ever going to Chelsea. But I'm particularly interested in this way of getting a price, the sealed bid thing.
Okay, yeah, people know I'm a Brighton fan.
Yeah, of course.
The Brighton owner, Tony Bloom, is a professional poker player. Now, what you do? I don't know if ever you played poker. Ultimately, it's you trying to face off against somebody in a glorified form of negotiation. If you are up against a professional poker player, you really have to be brilliant at what you do. Bloom is superb. Paul Barber is superb, and Chelsea made a number of offers, and they just they said we're not saying enough price. That's not enough. They were smart enough to get Caicedo to sign a new contract earlier this year, even though he was hankering after a move. And then it was announced 10 days ago, stroked leak. Now, where these leaks come from, I don't know whether that's from Brighton. It doesn't strike me as being their strategy. Could be from the player's agent, and remember, the player's agent, his responsibility is to get the best wages, the best deal for his client. So he might have said, well, yeah, we've heard that Liverpool, and I'd heard from sources on Merseyside that Liverpool were genuinely interested. So it didn't come as a huge shock, but you have to take these things to pinch of salt. So what Brighton did, and I think this was a smart move, was to say, you've not matched the price, and it's a bit like if you've got two people who are interested in your house. You say, right, look, instead of faffing around, instead of coming back to us every 24, 48 hours, the season's starting this weekend, we want final offers at midnight Thursday night. And Liverpool, by all accounts, bid 111 million. That was accepted by Brighton, but there are three parties to the deal, which is the buying club, the selling club, and the player himself. The player's representatives, and I suspect it is the representatives. I don't know Moises Caicedo. I'm not aware of his education. I'm not aware of his financial literacy, but I would suspect that he has devolved all of that responsibility to his agents. The player's agents said, we think our client's best deal is coming from Chelsea. And they advised their client accordingly, and therefore Caicedo effectively said, I want to go to Chelsea.
Right. It looks like Chelsea are also going to be getting Elise from Crystal Palace, my club. And there's a lot of Palace fans saying, well, if Caicedo's worth 115 million, Elise's worth a lot more than the 35 million pound that he seems to be going for. But the debate is amongst Palace fans is that the 35 million pound was his release clause. But does that mean then, Kieran, if you have a release clause of £35 million, that's the maximum you can ask for a player? Why can you not say, right, the release clause is 35 million quid, but we think he's worth 70?
Well, you can say that, and then it comes down to the specific wording in the contract. Right, because if we go back probably about 7 or 8 years, do you remember that Luis Suarez had a release clause in his contract at Liverpool of, I think it was 50 million. And Arsenal, well, it could have been 40 million, it could have been 50 million. And then Arsenal bid 50 million and £1. And that was a minimum price. And by all accounts, Liverpool then turned round to Arsenal and says, yeah, that's the price at which we're prepared to talk, but it's not enough. Now, that's, I think, where the contract had been written. And Fenway Sports Group, who own Liverpool, are very, very smart when it comes to the paperwork. So I suspect the way that the contract was worded was perhaps the Suarez's agent thought they had to talk to him, and Liverpool has said, no, it's just that's the minimum amount between the two clubs, and we still have to have an acceptable offer. So it could be that in Elise's contract, that's a start point, i.e., Crystal Palace have to have a discussion at 35 million with Chelsea. I suspect 35 million allows the player to talk to Chelsea. And that's the downside. Yeah, the paperwork on these things is complex. Yeah, McAllister went to Liverpool for 35 million. Compared to Caicedo, he's worth a lot more as well. Now, there's been talk about some form of clause in McAllister's contract, which he signed in October, which allowed Liverpool to effectively get the player at what appears to be a bargain price. And I would say, yeah, and I've seen Elise play. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, my gut reaction is his market value. If Mason Mount is worth 55 to 60, then he's got to be worth more than 35.
Yeah, I hope, Kieran, you're not implying that some of the people who do these deals at Crystal Palace are not as smart as some of the people at Liverpool, because if you are, I shall be forced to agree with you. Moving away from transfer values, Kieran, something we have spoken about right from the very first week of the pod is the infamous loan taken up by the owner of West Brom, and it's rumbling on, and there's some slightly disturbing figures coming out this week.
Yes, so here we are looking at Gauchon Lai. I won't do the cheap and easy gag that is available there with regards to his name. West Bromwich Albion is complex because of the structure. We've got West Bromwich Albion Football Club Limited, we've got West Bromwich Albion Group Limited, we've got West Bromwich Albion Holdings Limited, there's a West Bromwich Albion brackets Hong Kong Limited. There's an awful lot of companies knocking round, but there are a few loans which are a cause for concern. First of all, there's a loan effectively to Gauchon Lai in his Hong Kong based industry. That was for just under £5 million. That was promised for repayment in mid-22, then by the end of 2022. And his most recent comment was the loan will be repaid early in 2023. It's the 16th of August. That's not early. But I think equally concerning is a loan which has come from what appears to be a boiler company in the Midlands called Warmfront Holdings. And the loan was for £2 million. And it had a repayment amount, and it appears to be effectively secured on some of the shares of one of the West Bromwich Albion companies. And by secured, it means that if there is default, then this hot water company can acquire shares as sort of a form of default. But The loan was originally due for repayment on the 28th of February 2022. Repayment wasn't made. The loan was then extended to the 31st of May 2022. Not repaid. And there is an interest penalty in the if you look at the small print of one of the West Brom company's accounts, which says, in the event of non-payment, we're going to move to a punitive interest rate of 5% a month. And from my understanding, and I may be wrong, but my understanding, it's you end up paying interest on the interest. So this £2 million loan, which was taken out effectively for repayment in 2022, if you start to compound the interest, and this is where my relationship with a well-known relative of mine sort of initially started. 5% interest monthly works out as an annual interest rate of around about 73, 75%. So I calculated by March 2025, which isn't that far away, that £2 million loan will have turned into £10 million being outstanding, which is just ridiculous. And this is why, folks, we're not Martin Lewis. If you owe money on a credit card, for heaven's sake, that should always be your first target in terms of what you'll be repaying, because you end up paying interest on interest. And the credit card companies are no friend of the consumer, despite how they like to market themselves. So it is a concern. West Brom, are they going to be forced to sell players? If they are, do you have any confidence as to whether the receipts from those player sales will be used to repay these loans? It's deeply concerning.
Do we know, Kieran? I'm going to make the assumption that it is the case. This loan coming from the boiler company, is this the same boiler company that's one of the club's main sponsors? Do we know?
No,
it's not.
No, I think that's ideal.
Oh,
this appears to be a different one. Yeah, because I do think that the West Brom mascot is one of my favourite mascots.
Boily the Boiler or whatever it is.
That's right.
He's a secondary mascot, I think you'll find, Kieran. But that's interesting, Kieran, because I just assumed that this would be the case, that they're borrowing money from the sponsors, because I was going to ask you very clever questions about whether or not you're able to borrow money from sponsors. But this is... it seems a very random place to go to for a loan, Kieran, doesn't it? A boiler company?
It does. Looking at the accounts of Warmfront Holdings, and as always, Company's House is our friend here. It does seem to be investing in a variety of industries. And as always, Google can take you down an interesting set of rabbit warrens as to the people involved with the boiler company itself.
That's interesting. And speaking of the repayment, Kieran, you remember, I think it was the third week in January this year, we spoke to somebody from a West Brom fan group. We had a very interesting conversation with him. We jokingly said, well, don't worry, because that very week, Gouch and I had said the money will be repaid by the end of the week. And everyone did, joking, well, I believe that when I see it, things. And as you say, it's now the 16th of August. He owes more money now, so it's one. I don't think there's any danger for West Brom fans, but again, we've had so many instances, Kieran, of clubs that we talk about almost jokingly at the start, and then suddenly the snowball starts to grow and grow, and it does worry me a little bit that West Brom's the snowball's rolling. It seems to me, at the very least.
It is, and I think that there are two issues. Is there a danger of the club going into administration? I wouldn't be red flagging it at present, but I'd certainly be having an amber in terms of concern, because this money has to be generated. Now, they could sell a couple of players and improve their cash flow for all we know. There has to be a cause for concern, because there appears to be a vacuum in terms of governance at the top of the club, and there have been too many other clubs. Is there a danger of West Brom outing, the worst happening, the nuclear button happening, the club going out of existence? No, it's too big a brand And again, we've sort of had this discussion when we had somebody from Reading on the show, and I know Ali Jones from the West Brom Albion for Action, and he's very, very passionate, and he messages me a few times a week. We just keep up to date. Him and Adrian Childs and I have got our own sort of, we're tight in terms of West Brom discussions, but it's a cause for concern, but it's not the club at most risk at present, in my view.
Maybe we should get our old friend Adrian Goldberg on to have a chat about what West Brom fans are feeling. The whole of Spanish football, Kieran, has got the hump with PSG. Yes,
or rather, the head of La Liga, Javier Tebas, is a man. If we were at school, you and I and Javier Tebas, every time we'd bunked off to go and see a gig in the 1970s, Kevin, he would have reported us to teacher. So they're doing it again. I've seen them. They got tickets for the Clash. For reasons best known to himself, because Spanish football does have some domestic challenges. La Liga has reported Paris Saint-Germain in respect of, and I quote, foreign subsidies to sign top coaches and players. Now, if it had been Harry Redknapp, it would have been top coaches and players. But even so, it's a strange phrase to use. And then they're going and saying the approach taken by the Qatari QSI, the Qatari Sports Institute, in terms of its ownership of Paris Saint-Germain, and I quote, seriously damages the sports ecosystem, i.e., they're still seeing their arse about Neymar and Messi leaving Spain to go and play in Paris. And they are claiming that it's anti-competitive. And then you say, well let's just row back on this, because Real Madrid have just signed Jude Bellingham for 118 million euro. You've got Dembele, Coutinho, Griezmann, all being signed by Barcelona for more than 100 million over 3 or 4 years ago. So when it's Spanish clubs signing players on big fees, they seem perfectly okay. And again, it's a bit of sulkiness with regards to, and this is on the back of Mbappe doing yet another U-turn in terms of where he sees his future, and now, bigger misunderstanding. I'm going to spend another year in Paris, and just wires crossed or something along those lines. And Real Madrid, who thought that Mbappe was definitely going to come to them either this summer or next summer, they're not so certain. So all on the back of that, we've got La Liga effectively being the cheerleaders for Real Madrid and saying, why on earth would somebody want to live in? Why would a French person want to live in Paris? He could come into Madrid. Imagine Parisian culture and art. All of these things are absolutely awful. He's a hostage. And that appears to be the implication. And I'm just going, it's crazy. Get your own house in order first.
I don't remember bunking off school for gigs, Kieran, so much, because most gigs were in the evening. And as I didn't go to a posh boarding school, I'm not implying you did, Kieran, but I did. I did bunk off along with about 8 other kids who were Palace fans at our school to go and see a rearranged FA Cup game at Tooting and Mitcham, which was played on the Tuesday afternoon for some reason. I think the police said the Tooting and Mitcham's floodlights weren't strong enough to pick out the inevitable hooligan activity that would take place. And when I say bunk off, we actually just knocked on headmaster's door and said, we've got tickets for this rearranged FA Cup game. Has it got a problem with that? And he went, nah, fine. Yeah, particularly, I think the phrase he used was, you won't be missed. Staying in Spain, Kieran, I'm going to give you some words here, and I'd like you to put them in the correct order. Another loan payday Barcelona.
Yes. Economic levers. A phrase which did not exist in the world of finance, and I've been in the world of finance for a few decades. Economic news. Barcelona have a new arrangement to liberate 29.5% of Barca Vision, which is the club's, and I quote, I'll brief that. The club's initiative to integrate all digital content around Web3 and blockchain, including NFTs and metaverse, which are part of the club's strategy to build the digital S by Barca.
Yeah, you had me at blockchain.
Yes. So, what is the issue with Barcelona? I've just been critical of La Liga, but one thing which La Liga are very good at is actually having some form of domestic cost control. And I will try to get somebody from La Liga onto the show to explain it, because I was on a panel with Nick DeMarco a few months ago, and I met somebody from La Liga, and he was very, very impressive. So I just need to try and dig out his number. And the way that it effectively works is that you look at the amount of money that's coming into the club. You subtract the amount of money that you have to pay based on your budget for general overheads, football transfers, loan repayments, and so on. And whatever's left over, you're allowed to spend on wages. So that there is a strategy there. And Barcelona they've only got about 12 players officially registered for this season. They've signed players. The likes of Gundogan. Gundogan, I don't think, is registered to play for Barcelona as yet, even though he's effectively signed on a free transfer. So, potentially he could leave if he's unable to play football. So it is very messy. So one of the ways you can do this, if you think about it, it's the money coming into the club, less your committed payments. Well, if you can increase the money coming into the club through selling part of the club's digital metaverse, blockchain, whatever it is, that will allow Barcelona to recruit players, A, in terms of being able to pay wages, and B, to generate some funds. And it looks as if this figure is 120 million euro. It's from two companies called Libero and Nipa Capital. I think one of them's based in Frankfurt Market, and one of them's based in the Netherlands. It all looks very complicated and messy, and some of this appears to be linked to a previous deal to sell part of this company. So it's a mess.
They haven't got many tiles left on the wall to sell, Kieran, have they? To be perfectly honest. But I'm not entirely sure I even understand this next bit of Barcelona news. But so they can sell bits of it, but it seems they can also list separate bits of it on the New York Stock Exchange, as they've done with something this week.
Yes, but this is Barca Media as opposed to Barca Vision.
What was I thinking?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Again, we're going to go into acronym and nerd territory central here. They are trying to create a company which is going to be traded in New York, and Manchester United are traded in New York. And the reason for that is there is a perception that American investors are a bit more willing to embrace different companies. Manchester United tries to sell itself as an entertainment company in the USA, as a tech company, as opposed to it's a football club, isn't it, as far as we're concerned. Yeah. And Barca Media, they brought out something with an organisation called Mountain, which is a SPAC, which stands for Special Purpose Acquisitive Company. And the SPAC, it works like this. You've got some very, very rich people with loads of dosh, and they don't know what to do with it. Now, you and I, we could probably help them there, Kevin. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, they'd rather go to these professionals. And this company says, give us all of your money, and what we will do is we will either invest it in a company over the course of the next 12 months to 18 months, or you get your money back. So this company, Mountain, appears to say, we're going to take on Barca's media rights, and it's put forward a very, very glossy brochure, and there's a welcome video that I've watched from the president of Barcelona, and it all looks very slick. And I sort of, I'm a nerd. I read every single page, and I thought, this all sounds very good, But the one thing that appears to be missing is some numbers.
Ah.
Now, as an investor, one of the things you are looking for, do we have any projected figures and so on? So it all looks, to me, it looks like a house of cards. And style over substance. But, I probably would have said the same about Facebook and Instagram 15 or 10 years ago, because I'm an old school type of person. It could be worth billions in a few years, or it could become the new MySpace. Who knows?
Yeah, so what you're saying, Kieran, is that our listeners should exercise care before buying shares in Barcelona's content creation unit.
I think that would be wise. Let the buyer beware. If you have previously taken an investment advice from Paris Hilton, John Terry and Michael Owen, this could be for you.
The San Siro, Kieran, has been saved from demolition by a slightly unusual source.
Yes, the Lombardo authorities have decreed that the San Siro is culturally significant and therefore must be preserved. Now, it was built in the 1920s. Again, we remember Italia 90, and it had been it had a major upgrade there. But we are living in 2023. There is an expectation, especially from corporate customers, of a level of service, and it's difficult to do that in an old building, which effectively are the equivalent of a Grade 2 listed building. So therefore, you can only do a few things, and you can't change. So it's a magnificent piece of architecture. There's no doubt about that. So as a result of it being culturally significant, I think this is the sad thing. Where does it leave the two tenants? It looks like we're going to have two new stadiums now in the city for both AC and Internazionale, both of which will probably be capable of hosting 60 to 65,000 people, which appears to be sort of the going rate for a big city these days. Where that will therefore leave the San Siro, yes, it won't be demolished, but who's going to maintain it? And I know I've said this before on the show. I remember going to Cape Town probably about 4 or 5 years ago with the Baroness, and I said, "Well, I was here for the World Cup in 2010, and I just saw some magnificent stadium, good memories. It was a really good World Cup to go to as a fan, and it's just an overgrown monstrosity these days, and it's effectively left to go to rack and ruin." So certainly, my familiarity with Milan, and I have a relative who used to run a bank from Milan, and Italian culture is that it won't necessarily get the level of TLC that you would hope it get, and what could happen to it. It might not be demolished, but it might start to decay.
Yeah, because historically, of course, Kieran, the top Italian clubs haven't been able to exploit their stadium, or indeed the fans that go in it, because most of them don't own their stadium, do they? They tend to be owned by the municipality or the town itself.
They do, and that is good in a way, in the sense that one of the things that we have spoken about since the start of this show is separation of football club from football stadium when it comes to individual owners can be a cause for concern, because the owners will at times not have the same moral and ethical compass in terms of preserving and protecting the football club as a piece of local culture and history and heritage and so on, all the things which mean a lot to us as legacy fans, because they just see it as a piece of land which could be redeveloped for flats. So at least you've got the protection there of the municipalities. But if anybody is familiar with Italian macroeconomic finances at both a federal and state and city level, they will know that the vast majority of the individual cities are bust in effect, and therefore that's why there's not been a lack of investment in the stadiums.
Yeah, I'm just going to Google Italian macroeconomics. And in the meantime, thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution to the pod, that'd be very kind of you. You can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. We've now added a new benefit for our £5 a month subscribers. We've set up a Discord channel, and we were doing live chats on there once a month. We'll bring you the date of the first one. It will be this month. Next week. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And finally, if you'd like to pre-order our new book, Unfit and Improper Persons, or one of our other books, Get Us, you can get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt as well. You can go to our new look website at priceoffootball.com. Producer guy's been busy over the summer, isn't he? So that website's priceoffootball.com. Our next pod will be on Monday, and it's our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always, folks, and for the Patreon supporters, we are very grateful, and that's why we're going to try to set up this new line. We hope to have some other announcements with regards to the price of football, in a case of giving more opportunities to meet face to face. We're saying no more than that, but we're in talks with a few venues at present. There's another way, however, you can support the show, and that's to give us a review using your app. It doesn't matter what you say. It's the important thing that it helps. Reviews help the algorithms and help us in the charts and help us with credibility. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by Tony Soprano and Gauchon Lai. And I think that could be an interesting business discussion.
I think even Producer Guy would struggle to get those two in the same room, wouldn't he?
Yes, true. Yeah. I think Adrian Goldberg and Adrian Charles might want a word with Mr. Lai before we get a chance to talk to him.
Oh, that would be a cheery conversation, wouldn't it? I want it to be hosted by Roy Hodgson and that startled Sheffield United player on Saturday.
Yeah, there's life in the old puppy, there, isn't there?
I just would love to have been. I'd given anything to have been training Sheffield United on Monday. The stick he was going to get for being beaten up by Roy Hodgson. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.